All right, well, we got little Rita in the shop, and I don't know if I mentioned this or not, but the hydraulic pump's been acting up really ever since we've ever owned it. But it finally is giving out on me. Got to the point where the front end loader will barely pick itself up, and the box blade at an idle, actually even revved up, at an idle, the box blade won't even come off the ground. And when I rev it up, it comes about halfway up and then just sets back down, and then halfway up, sets back down. So it's got some sort of pressure relief or check valve or something in there that's not holding, is not doing what it's supposed to. Anyway, you can see I've got her all cleaned up. Y'all take a good long look. This is probably the cleanest you'll ever see this tractor, unless I have to do major repairs again. But ultimately, we're going to be pulling the seat off first. We'll pull this back panel off so we can see in there. And there's a panel under the seat, and there's a panel in front of the seat. So just some nuts and bolts real quick. We're going to get this opened up, and then we'll see what we can see. Okay, so we got the seat and the panels taken out of the way, at least enough that we can see in here. And yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of stuff, but I don't know what it is. And I don't really even know where to begin. So, it looks like this is some sort of framing member, and I'm trying to decide if it's actually attached. I don't think it is. I think this is part of just the seat support. So I think that can come off, be out of the way. I really don't think we need to take off the rope system here. I think I just need to take these seat brackets out of the way, and that pretty well puts us on top of it. I mean, this is it right here on top. You have to take some of this stuff off the back end, just like the 3-point harness and stuff like that. But yeah, anyway, that's the look so far. All right, give you all a little update, and this is just a reminder to myself too, a couple of things that I came across. First of all, if you remember the last video, this plate that's still up here, I couldn't get that knob off. I finally grabbed a pair of pliers and I just basically ripped it off of there, but what I found was there was a set screw in the top, or at least there's supposed to be. I basically just twisted it off by hand, and in doing so, I guess I backed that screw out, but the knob has a little cap on it like this. I guess you're supposed to be able to pop that cap off and pull the screw. I didn't think about that. Most of these knobs here, they just slip off, you know? And I thought that one looks like, oh, it's a simple just a twist off, but it's not. I figured you just rotate it off. Anyway, I got that off and out of the way. This little linkage here, and again, look, I'm not an expert on this stuff, people. I don't know what it does. But this little linkage here is connected to a whole bunch of other linkages, and it's funny looking under this tractor how much of all these different levers and linkages, they've got 4 and 5 pivot points. Anyway, it was linked up here on the side of this 3-point arm. There's a little roll pin there that makes sure that that piece stays in the right position. So this little cap that goes on the end of the 3-point arm, that's where that linkage hooked up, and that's where that roll pin goes. But you see on the right hand side, there is no roll pin, nothing on that cap. I went ahead and took that cap off. That bolt is just a keeper, threads in, and then that arm is on those splines. So I've got this one taken off. I'm gonna go ahead and knock this side out, just hit it out with a hammer, kind of jiggle that arm as I do, just to make sure nothing's getting seized up or bound up. I'm still struggling a little bit to decide, to figure out if all of this needs to come off or not. Like I look at it and it looks like this is all just, you know, the 3-point, like the top link bracket, but then several of these linkages are attached to it. And so I'm wondering if I just leave it on there, because I don't want to undo any more of these linkages than I have to, like this. I don't know what this does. I have no idea what that does. I've never, in all the time I've owned this tractor, I've never pulled that linkage to see what it would do. I have no idea. So, I mean, yeah, maybe operator's manual, huh? But I don't know. So I don't want to, and it looks like, you know, it's all connected to the spring back in here and all these other linkage elbows, but they're all part of that. So if I can pull the hole off without having to disconnect those things, that's what I want to do. But I'm afraid I'm going to end up having to disconnect some of it just to be able to see, to get to other nuts and bolts. Like, I can't get to that bolt anyway because this little piece is sticking out in the way. And it's kind of counterintuitive because I'm like, well, I guess that's a snap ring, and this is just a pin of some sort running through there. But, you know, I mean, I could get a box wrench in there if I had to. Anyway, I guess I'm just going to keep pecking on it, but I mostly want to make that update just to mention this little linkage being hooked up here, because I figure that's something I might forget about in the future. So, we'll keep pecking on it. Well, okay, we finally got it off there. And honestly, there wasn't any tricks to it. I did it all with standard wrenches. There's all my pile of wrenches that I ended up using. Not standard size, sorry. Well, the 15/16. Let's take off a hydraulic hose. But everything else, you know, was 17, 14, 12. I had taken this loose at first because I thought I was going to have to take this whole bracket off the back, but I ended up realizing that none of that needed to actually come off, and that's actually better, at least, because all those linkages and stuff, you know, are hooked to it, and I didn't want to disconnect all those and then forget how to put them back together, so I'll leave that burden on the shop that rebuilds it. But anyway, once you got enough, I just had to get enough stuff off to access all the nuts and bolts, and some of them are studs, and some of them were actually bolts, which is interesting, and one of the studs came out like a bolt. I can't look at this and tell you, I mean, I flipped it up and looked at the inside. I can't tell you from looking at it if anything's messed up as far as like a certain seal washed out. And that's why I wanted to send as much as I could, because even like this valve body, it's 3 bolts there and 2 bolts here, and I could take it off. But I want to leave it. I want to send it and let them look at that too, because I don't know, maybe the problem's in there. I don't think it is, because it just runs this connection here for your, like if you've got a disc or something behind you that's got hydraulic accessory on it. So I don't think that's part of the problem unless somehow fluid is bypassing through that valve and doesn't need to be. So I'm going to send all that together. There's really nothing else. I mean, this is looking down in the transmission in the differential basically. I did notice this. That's all scratched up there. And it's all, sorry, looking at my hand. See, that's all chewed up. I mean, I can feel that. Like it's something is in there. And you know, sometimes when I'm driving, I'll hear this clicking sound. Like it's almost like there's a broken spline on a gear somewhere that, as it's coming around, to click, 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 click. And when it does, I'll feel it on the. Oh, that's cool. That's the. That's what that is. That's the. To lock your rear end. And I don't know. Maybe that's something. You know, maybe that. The way it's scratched up on there, maybe something down in there broke. Anyway, I'm going to drain the oil out. I'm not going to do it right now, I don't think. But I'm going to drain the oil out just so I can see down in the bottom. Hopefully I can see in the bottom because I don't really want to drop the pan underneath if I don't have to. The oil needs to be changed anyway. You can see it's got that just kind of murky, nasty color to it. What's funny is looking through the sight glass, it looks normal enough. It looks kind of, you know, reddish colored. But looking in on top, it's like just gross. gross. So that's going to need to be changed anyway. And I know some water got in it the other day. I added a bucket of oil. The bucket, I guess, it'd been sitting outside and the lid cracked because it had a lid on it. But as I poured the bucket, it got down. All of a sudden, I saw a slug of, you know, that white hydraulic oil, that slime that you get when you get water in there. So anyway, that'll all get changed. The filter will get changed. But yeah, all in. It really wasn't bad. Let's see, I don't know what time it is now. I thought about it. Let's see. His clock says it's 11 o'clock on the button. And I know I didn't get here till probably close to 9. Well, yeah, 8:30 at the earliest. So 2.5 hours to get it off. I'd say that's pretty good for me for having this been the first time ever doing it and having no idea what I was doing. Just taking stuff off as it made sense. So, you know, it's interesting. It's kind of like working on the excavator. It looks like it's going to be really complicated, but you take off a couple of panels so you can really see in there, and pretty quickly you can find that it's not as bad as you thought. A couple of, you know, I had to use a wrench. I was trying to use a ratchet on everything I could, but a couple of these nuts and bolts I did have to use a wrench on just because there wasn't space to get the ratchet in there. But of course that's normal. So anyway, I'm going to call the dealer and ask them, because they said they shipped this off to be rebuilt. I'm just going to call and ask them, hey, you know, if you ship it to Houston, I'll just take it down there myself. But if they ship it off somewhere else, they have a specialty that works on these pumps, I'm just going to bring it to them and let them ship it off. All right, we're back in the shop today to get this unit put back on, and I'll just start off right away and say this is not the hydraulic pump like I thought it was. So lesson learned there. In the first video, I'll see if I can edit it out, but otherwise I call it the hydraulic pump a lot, and it's not. This is the 3-point control mechanism, which makes sense because the 3-point arms are the biggest thing that hook onto the back of it right here. But it also houses a bunch of other of your hydraulic features as far as it obviously does a 3-point and also the drift on the 3-point, but it has these levers on it too for your auxiliary hydraulics off the back end, and it has an outfeed port that goes to the front end loader and lets fluid all the way through to it. So that's why I was thinking that it was the hydraulic pump and that it was just gear driven off the transmission, but it's not at all. The actual hydraulic pump, since we're talking about it, is right here on the front, and there are actually 2 of them. So they are, let's see, I guess this might be a gear-driven housing, but anyway, this is your steering pump in the front, and this is the actual hydraulic pump that runs all your controls in the back. So much littler things there, you know, not this great big heavy unit. But the good news is this unit probably was my problem. My hydraulic pump was probably just fine. This probably was the issue. The shop said that based on the way it was acting, the way the 3-point was hiccuping, and then it didn't want to lift at all. They said that's probably in here because this is bypassing. And they tore it all apart, and they said, yeah, we found at least one spot where there was supposed to be a seal, and there just simply wasn't one. The seal was just gone. The backup seal behind it was also badly damaged. So they went through and rebuilt this thing, just replaced all the seals in it, and made sure everything else was clean and orderly. And actually did it pretty quick. They had it back to me. It was only $200 to have them go through it. So to me, that's totally worth it. And they had it done in a day. I dropped it off Monday afternoon after I got off the tractor and picked it up Tuesday afternoon. So can't complain about that. Today's Wednesday. Try to get it back on there, and this will be probably one of the fastest repairs I've ever made on a machine. Anyway, before we put the pump on, I want to change this fluid because that's nasty. So I'm just going to go ahead and drain it out of there. It really is a matter of discipline, because otherwise, see, I just called it the pump again. Otherwise, if I don't drain it out of there now, then I'll probably get it all put back on and be like, yay, it's working great. I want to just drive it. But there is just a drain bolt I found right here. I didn't know where it was at the other day when I was looking. I thought I was going to have to, you know, take this little side piece off, but there is actually a drain bolt right here on the bottom of the pan. So we'll get all that drained out and get the fresh fluid put in, and then we'll put the assembly back on. All right, so we got the oil drained out and cleaned the pan out as best I could. There's not actually a pan underneath this thing from what I can see. Like, I can't unbolt a pan off the bottom, so it's just down here in the top. But you can see it's emptied out. We did find a few interesting artifacts. Here's the biggest pieces of metal that we pulled out. And the thing is, I find these chunks of metal, but I can't find anywhere, just from what I can see in the top, I can't find anywhere that it looks like they really came from. So there may be a broken tooth or a ground tooth somewhere in there. But there was all sorts of little filings. The plug is magnetic, and then I took a long handle magnet and just kind of swept the bottom of the pan to try to pick up every little bit that I could. I know there's still some in there that I didn't get, but if it's stuck in the bottom of the pan, it's probably going to stay in the bottom of the pan. So all the scoring that looks like on this, I can't really explain that because I can't even find anything that interacts with that component that should ever be on top of that. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, that thing, if I stomp my differential lock, it doesn't swing upwards. And when I look at what's on the bottom of the control block here, there's nothing that swings down that I can see that should ever hit that. So, yeah, I don't know. I can't explain those marks. Maybe they're just wash marks. Maybe when that thing dumps pressure, it blasts against that, and it's actually just wash marks and not really scratches like it looks like. But I don't know. I'm just guessing. Anyway, so we got it drained out. It took out about not quite 10 gallons of oil. I've got 10 gallons to go back in. This is what I've been running. See, they're both Cam 2 brand. That's the cheap house brand stuff. The Ag 20 is what I've been running, hydraulic fluid. The green bucket is what the dealer just told me I should buy, premium universal tractor hydraulic fluid. I don't know what the difference is. They had this, the dealer had this in their showroom as well. But they said, no, that's not what you want. You want the green bucket. Well, it's what I got. It's what I've been using. So we're going to be running 50-50 here. And yeah, I don't know, maybe, well, see, it says on the bucket SAE 20. I don't know what weight this is. I can look, but I really don't care that much. Anyway, you know, I may do, once this is all said and done and get it put together, I should probably really change my fluid again and change the filter. Knowing that they're seeing all these metal filings that are in there, it certainly wouldn't hurt to change the filter again. I'm going to go ahead and dump in about 1.5 of these buckets since I've got it open. It's easy to access because the fill neck on the back of this thing sucks to try to put fluid into once it's like once the 3-point arms and everything are on it and the back plates, it sucks. So I'm just going to go and put it in now and then we'll get our actual 3-point piece put back on. Okay, well, I should probably take a break here and just kind of tell you guys a couple of things I've run into along the way. Going back on, it's been really pretty easy. I probably spent, so far today, I've spent the most of my time changing that oil and just kind of trying to be a little meticulous on, you know, with that magnet, trying to pick up little bits of metal and stuff out of the bottom of that pan or bottom of that case. But once I got all that cleaned up, I pulled off the old gasket. The dealer didn't have a new gasket to go in there, and so I just bought some RTV, the blue gasket sealer instead. It's not ideal. I would have rather had the proper gasket, but I think it's going to be fine. This is not a pressurized joint. There's just, you know, hydraulic oil that basically drains out of this top piece down into the case. So it's not like it's really under a bunch of pressure, not really even a bunch of temperature really. So I'm not worried about it really blowing out of there. I laid it on nice and thick and then we picked this whole thing up. I say me, which was awkward, but I got that whole thing picked up there and stabbed in place. It's actually got 2 little studs underneath I think there's one under here and one somewhere else, little pins to help make sure you line it up right. But I also had some of these bolts like on the back, this is a nut and a stud, that's a nut and a stud. But then further forward, there's bolts. And so there's actually a couple of factory studs that stick up as well as the little pins on there to help you line up. So it lines up super easy. The one thing I ran into, I got myself confused. So, you know, pay attention to where your bolts come from. I had 2 bolts that were sitting on the floor over there that were a little bit longer, and then I had all the bolts up on the bench that I thought had all come out of the top of the assembly. Well, I just grabbed random bolts, dropped them all back in. The 2 in the front, this one down here and this one over here, were absolutely the hardest to get to. I had to just barely get a wrench on to turn them, just a little bitty bit. And I fought, got them all the way threaded down, and then they bottomed out and still had like 3/8 of an inch to go. It's like, oh, that's weird. So those are too long. So then I thought, oh, well, they must have come from here because there's this plate. The bolts have to go through the plate and then into the block. So I pulled the 2 shorter ones out of here, put them in there. That was fine. Put the longer ones in here. They went all the way down. That was fine. So I thought I had it. And then I grabbed the 2 off the floor and I went to put them in back here thinking, hey, there's 2 bolts together. They must have been the 2 that I pulled from here and they were too short. So the 2 that I had are on the floor should have been up here. I swapped them out, put them in there, pulled the 2 longer ones out of there, put them in there, and now we're good to go. So the whole thing is bolted down. I don't know what the torque specs are. I don't have the shop manual. I gave her the old, you know, hard pull, if you will. I don't know, maybe I put 80, 100 foot-pounds on it, maybe. I don't think I'm that strong and my wrench isn't that big. But I just gave it a good tight turn. Remember, the one that was underneath the here was kind of a booger to get to. I had to take these 3, this bolt, and there's one on the side there and one on there. So I had to take this valve body and pull it out to the side a little bit, and then I was able to drop a ratchet right down on top to get on the bolt that's underneath there, and then put this piece back on. So that's back on, tightened up. I got my main supply line. This is your line coming from the pump. I got it put back on, tightened up. Be careful with this. It has 2 brass crush washers. That's a little funny. It's similar to the bolt and assembly. If you ever work on older brakes, older hydraulic brakes, they've got the bolt has actual ports through it, and this housing is kind of ported all the way around, and then the bolt has ports through it, so everything can flow through. So that's on, torqued up. That's pretty much, that's it for the 3-point. So last thing is, when I was taking it apart, these O-rings and the washers fell off of here. They fell out readily, and so I was like, well, either they're stretched and worn or they're not that critical. So I did slide these sleeves out and look in there. There's not a seat. Those O-rings don't seat in a groove. There's just 2 O-rings on each side, back to back, that slip on this stainless collar, and this collar can slide in and out a little bit too. But those are just there in case the fluid in here, again, is not under pressure. So they're just there to try to help prevent anything kind of weeping out and you having, it looking oily and wet on the back of your tractor. So I went ahead, I took these sleeves all the way out, wiped them really clean. They're just little bits of dirt and grit. Wiped the O-rings off and cleaned them up. So you can see these ones, here's the O-rings to go back in. You can see they just got little bits of dirt and grit on them. So wipe them real clean, wipe the sleeves real clean, slip the O-rings back on, and then same with the washer. The washer goes on, it doesn't actually go over the collar, it comes right up against it, and then your 3-point link arm is going to go up against there. On the link arms, pay attention. Luckily, I'm happy the dealer told me this because I wouldn't have thought about it. On your spline there, on this, you see that little kind of, on the left-hand side, that little mark, that little tick mark. There should be a comparable tick mark on the 3-point link arm somewhere. I'll have to look for it. Got to make sure those line up. If those don't, that can rotate incorrectly. Either won't rotate all the way up, or it'll rotate too far, or your link arms will rotate out of sync with each other, so you'll have one side pick up higher than the other. So make sure you get those lined up so that the splines are in the right spot, so your link arms are even and nothing's over pulling or under pulling. Oh, let's see, what else? Yeah, other than that, it's just kind of bolting little frame pieces back in and getting the seat and the panels back on. So hopefully another, I don't know, hour maybe. The hardest part of it's all done, so now it's just kind of little nuts and bolt stuff, just putting it back together. So I'll show you guys something real quick. This side lined up really easy. Let's see if I can get the camera in there. So you see the tick mark. See the tick mark there kind of on the top right of the outside. And if you look down inside on the face of the gear, maybe you can see this. Oh, goodness. I'm trying to get my camera in there close enough you guys can see it. So looking down inside, there you can see the tick mark at the top of the screen, okay? So if you can, it's really hard to see because I can't get my camera in there, but you can see the tick mark down inside of there, if it'll focus, and you can follow that groove in the spline out to see, there we go, perfect. So the spline on the inside shaft, follow that groove out and you see the tick mark on the outside of the link arm. So that one's lined up right. This one, I picked it up and I just threw it on real quick just to see if I could get lucky, and I didn't. It's out by one tooth. But look at my link arms. Look how much difference one tooth can make, okay? So anybody looking at this, if you didn't even know the tick marks were there and you just paid attention, you'd be like, huh, that's strange. I mean, look at the actual, look up top on this, you know, this here versus that over there. Look how much different they are. So this side, see if you can see the marks on it. You see the mark there kind of in left center, and you can see the inside of the gear. If you come out on the shaft from the inside, follow that groove out, you'll see it's off by just one groove. So I'll get that shifted over and get it fixed. I just wanted to show you guys that because I mentioned it. So I wanted to show you how much of a big difference it can make. Just being off by one tooth, you can see it, you would know. It's not like being slightly off on a timing shaft or something to where you can't see how it lines up. It's pretty easy to see. Okay, I got the link arms on. They're all lined up correctly. You can see they're balanced now. One thing I wanted to mention, I mentioned the O-rings that were in here earlier, and I said, you know, they're not high pressure seals, but there is some depth to this shaft where they go in, or this column, if you will, okay? Barrel, whatever. And there's 2 O-rings back to back. Go ahead, once you get all this set back up here, kind of center this shaft up, and when you clean it up, those silver collars push them about halfway in, and then go ahead and bed that first O-ring. You can just use a screwdriver, just poke it in there real easy. Like I said, it doesn't fit in a groove, it's nothing complicated, but go ahead and push it all the way in. I did not, and so it hung up right on this face. And then when I put the second O-ring on, it didn't want to stay up on the outside of that collar. So get the first one shoved in there, push your collar all the way up to the edge or halfway, whatever. The collar itself it'll drive in naturally as you start to push this on and tighten it down. So, but I went ahead and pushed them in to where I had just about a 1/4 inch sticking out, enough to set that second O-ring on. And as long as your first O-ring is buried in there where it's supposed to be, the second O-ring hangs on just fine. But if your first O-ring's not buried, the second one wants to fall off. So I fought with it for a little bit, trying to poke my screwdriver in there and find that. I said, you know what? Loosen this, slide it out. You don't have to take it off. If you make that mistake, you don't have to take this all the way off. Just slide it out to give yourself a little bit of working room in there. And then you can get your screwdriver in there and you can bed that O-ring, no problem. So that's up and on. Gotta tighten these back down. Don't forget about this little link arm here. Again, I have no idea what this thing does. I imagine it's basically a stall control. So when my link arms get high enough, it will stop them from going too high. So I've got to get that hooked back up. And that's just a little cotter key that goes in there. A little washer and a cotter key. So I get that hooked back on. I might actually have to hook that back on before. I thought it had enough play that I could kind of bend it out and hook it on there, but I guess I can just go pull this bolt out, take that washer off, at least slip the shaft back together and then put it back in. That's what I'll do. That's it for the major components. So then it's just that little piece of kind of seat frame that goes on, and then it's just body panels and handles. That's it. There's a little transmission vent. That's what this little piece is here. Originally I didn't take it off. I just pushed it out of my way, but then it kind of got in my way when I was working. So it's just a rubber hose there. It pops off, and it sits right on top of this little kind of standpipe right there. So, okay, yeah. Let me not leave rags buried up inside of here and zip ties, but all right. Let me fix that little doodad there. And I think that's it for, you know, like I said, I tried to minimize how many linkages and stuff I disconnected. So and this is the point, because when you go to put it back together, there's very few things that you actually disconnected in order to get to where we're at. This is cool. Okay, so I just got this link arm hooked back up, and I just said to you guys, I said, I don't even know what this thing is for, what it does. But now I know because it showed me. So this, when your 3-point arms pull up, so that's this lever. I want to raise my 3 points all the way up. So pull it all the way back till it stops, okay? And it just sits there, right? That's going to make the pump engage, or whatever this thing does, and it's going to pick your 3-point arms up. When they come up, this thing moves forward until the end of this right here tags your frame right there. So I'm going to simulate that. I'm going to pull back on it. Watch this. Boop. So what that does is basically it kicks your lift back into neutral, or a little bit. It should kick it back just a hair. It shouldn't really drop it that far. But it keeps you from having it locked in full lift, because if you're in full lift, this thing's going to raise up and it's just going to keep trying to go, and then it's going to actually put extra pressure. And he mentioned this in the mechanic shop. He said if you pull too hard, if this linkage is out of adjustment, you'll hear your engine bog down, you'll hear your pump whining, because this thing's still trying to lift and it just physically can't go any higher. So he mentioned that to me. He said, make sure you don't get this linkage out of adjustment. So I'm happy I didn't take it loose, because I would have almost certainly got it out of adjustment. And maybe it needs a little bit of adjusting, because here lately, I noticed that I would pull my arm up here and it would do just like that. It would fall back on its own. And I figured that was just part of the block in here going bad, and maybe it was. Anyway, I just saw that. I was sitting there hooking this up, and all of a sudden I saw that link arm fall forward, and I was like, what in the world? So I got to fidgeting with it just to see what it does. So that's neat. It's kind of a built-in safety stop. You know, little things like that, you don't really, as an operator of a tractor or a machine, you don't really think about them on a day-to-day basis, but it's cool to see when the mechanics or technicians or engineers or whoever designs this, it's cool to see when they find those little basic solutions to something to keep all of us from tearing up our stuff. Okay, there she is, all put back together in all her glory. Every knob, every screw, every boot, even the seat belt was put back on. I do like having the seat belt on sometimes, get on a grade or it's real bumpy ground. It's nice to have it. Oh, I guess I gotta put my drawbar and my top link back on. But everything as far as the deconstruction and removing that component and putting it all back together, that's all done. Oh, you know what? There's one. Oh, I gotta tighten that. That's that vent I was telling you about and that bolt for it. Right there. So let me tighten that back up, but then we're gonna jump on here and fire it up and see. I'm not really gonna know because when I parked it here in the shop, I was trying to show my father-in-law what was going on. And I raised the 3 points and I was standing on them and they came up with just me standing on them. But that was a fluke. We know there was a bigger problem. So I'm not really gonna know until I get it home and put it in service how it's really working. But we'll go ahead and at least start it up and just kind of move the levers around, try to let the hydraulic oil get moving around in there a little bit, and then we're gonna trailer it and head home.